Deal Nation. On the show today, we are joined by Glenn Poulos, the award-winning author of Never Sit in the Lobby, 57 Winning Sales Factors to Grow a Business and Build a Career. How you doing, Glenn?
I'm good, Michael. Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to have you on the show today because, in building up a real estate investment business, it is a business. And that within that you have a lot of sales, marketing, and even exit strategies. And I think it really helps to have someone who has seen how that functioned in a variety of different industries and to look at our industry from their perspective and be able to give us some feedback and maybe some actionable insights that we can apply to real estate businesses. So your experience, your history, and maybe your outside looking in perspective, I think will give us some good insights today.
Great. Yeah, looking forward to get into it.
So, you are obviously you're an accomplished author, you were an entrepreneur coach. I know you've worn a bunch of hats. So why don't you give the listeners a little bit more background about you and kind of how you got to this seat here on Deal Nation?
Yeah. So day to day, I'm really more of a working entrepreneur in a business, and I started my first business in '91 and sold it in the early 2000s. I had an opportunity to start a similar but slightly different business around that time that I exited, and I grew it. The first one was 15 years, and I sold it. The next one I grew for 15 years and sold it in 2022, and worked in private equity that bought the business for 3 years, and then knowing that private equity is usually a short-lived sort of deal, I bought another business. This time I used the opportunity to get myself a visa to work in the U.S. So I'm Canadian, my history is from Canada, and so I bought a business in Florida so I could get an E2 visa, and now I'm running a sort of my third sort of kick at the can, if you will, and of sort of building, growing, and scaling a business. Things like speaking and writing and coaching and stuff, those are all things I kind of do on the side. That's not my core, source of income or revenue, if you will. I'm really a guy who's running this day-to-day ins and outs of a business, trying to grow them and scale them, and then hopefully sell them, kind of thing, right? So
Sure. Yeah. And in the real estate investment industry, you see it a lot when businesses hit a real success point where the entrepreneurs look to venture out, and some go into coaching, some go into speaking events. I know a few certainly that have written books, education courses. But a lot of times it gravitates towards teaching others what you've learned via experience. So,
Right.
so for you, what was kind of the moment where you knew you wanted to share what you learned and get into more of that public facing side of things?
So, as where it probably really, well, back in the '80s when I started in sales, I started writing down everything I was learning about sales from everyone that knew more than I did, right? And over the years, I started writing little funny stories around them and giving them names, and then retelling the stories. And then those people would ask me to tell the stories again, and I'll tell them that story about such and such, and then they'd ask me to speak at meetings and things like that, right? And of course, everyone's like, "Oh, write a book," and this and that. And of course, I never did that. But then when the pandemic hit in 2020, locked up in Canada, nothing to do, nowhere to go, I decided, hey, what perfect time to maybe, go to that next step and sort of, try to put some structure to it and write a book. And so during the pandemic, that's when I wrote the book and published it in 2022. And coincidentally, right around the same time the book was coming out was when the business got bought by a U.S. firm. And I knew, that I had to stay for a while, but I knew it would end. And I thought, hey, maybe I can go on to this next sort of phase of, maybe a public speaking tour or whatever. And admittedly, I'm not quite there yet because, they needed me they kept me for 3 years, and I just finished that deal in the end of last year. And in the meantime, I'd bought another business, which kind of put a bit of a damper on my my idea of heading off as a public speaker. But I mean, I am committed to that path. It's just I keep getting stuck with a day job running a business. So but it all sort of revolved around the publishing of the book in 2022, and
Yeah.
trying to promote the book and things like that. And but admittedly, if I could grow this business over the next few years and sell it, I would love to then not do it again, not buy another company, but then really, try to go and spread the word. And honestly, it just came out of a desire to share the knowledge and to give back and pay it forward and things like that, right?
Yeah, I don't know, Glenn. You say that now, but you've been a serial entrepreneur for 30 plus years. Are you really going to not buy another business if you sell this one?
I don't know. I don't know. I keep saying like, man, this feels like a job, right? And
Yeah,
because I thought when I sold the company, I would retire and whatever, but it's I'm in my early 60s. It's way too early to retire, and I can't even imagine it. And so you might be right. And this time I switched, though. Made a bunch of switches, right? I switched countries, right? I went from Canada to the US, right? I switched
yeah,
technologies. I went from telecom and stuff primarily to high voltage electrical distribution utility space, the power grid, and the customers are all different, and the technology I'm selling is all different, right? And so everything is different. The only thing that's not different is the business is a distributor, and we buy and sell products, and that in itself is a repeatable process, right? Which so I was able to take everything I've learned over the years and apply them and just learn new customers, learn a new market, learn a new technology, but at its core, I'm not really having to learn a new business, right? And
yeah.
yeah,
No, it's a lot. A lot comes down to like systems and the
and
knowledge that you've
process.
built up. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Systems process, exactly.
Yeah,
It's interesting. I'd love to see because there's two kind of inflection points that get talked about on this show a lot. One, the earlier one is people say, well, and then 2008 happened, or
right.
2008, 2009,
Yeah,
right? And then
yeah,
the other, then the pandemic happened. And there seemed to be, I was clearly not creative enough during the pandemic because I can't tell you how many people I've talked to on this show that started new paths or side hustles or found a way to just really get kind of entrepreneurially creative during that time, you being one of them.
yeah. That's really, and that's funny. That's when I really got into like real estate's not been a lifelong thing for me. I mean, I had a house for a long time, but I mean, getting into the real estate investment side of things, that didn't really happen until just before and leading into the pandemic, and then throughout the pandemic and beyond. But of course, things got a little more challenging as 2022 rolled through, and 23 and 24 have been more complicated. As I'm sure many of your listeners are aware, and it's real estate and investing is very, very complicated and dynamic field in terms of cash flows and interest rates and stuff like that, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I use the pandemic was kind of a point where I made that shift. Although at work, the customers made us double down because we were kind of not an emergency, but there was a name for it, but basically a service we couldn't close, right? We got letters from all our customers and from the government saying you're a needed service, and you have to stay open, and you have to continue to service the customers, right? But
Yeah.
it's when I started, I got a little bit of that real estate bug was back then.
Cool. So with in that kind of space of the real estate bug, I know that what we wanted to talk about today, sort of the three
Yeah.
main things you and I talked about this pre-show. I want to kind of cover some processes and sales methods or sales communication methods. We want to talk about AI and how that's
Yeah.
affecting businesses, including REI businesses, and then maybe some big ticket exit strategies, right? How to package
Yeah.
up, sell, and move on. So I want to
Yeah.
start with on the process side. And I want to throw, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw a few avatars at you that are kind of
Okay.
our listener avatars, and let's kind of talk about that. Early that the business build, how we would help them with business building and maybe like sales communication specifically. Sound good?
Yeah. Okay. For sure.
All right. So avatar number one is someone who's never been. This is their first attempt at being an entrepreneur. They've never bought and sold a business, and they really need to learn not just the the day-to-day necessities of how to kind of grow a real estate investment business, to buy houses wholesale or buy land and flip it, but also really just the A to Z of how to be an entrepreneur, right? How do I set up my business? What are some tripping points to look for? That sort of thing. So what would be some just kind of, and this can be blanket information, really.
Sure.
Big umbrella
Yeah. No
information,
problem.
but
Yeah.
like for
So
that early stage entrepreneur, things to think
yeah.
about.
Right. For the early stage person, start small, start simple, right? And but the key focus is on the word start. And a lot of times in entrepreneurial ventures, my concept, I call it the wall, comes up, and it's where somebody, a man, woman, whatever, they want to start a business, and they keep sort of hitting this wall, like, oh, I'm scared to quit, or I'm this, and they're constantly sort of like keeping the day job or what have you. And to me, kind of like the real entrepreneurial journey starts on the other side of the wall, right? Like, I mean, you can have side hustles and all that, but I mean, I'm sort of speaking to the person that's wants to quit their 9 to 5 and go at it full, damn the
Mhm.
torpedoes, basically, right? Kind
Yeah.
of thing. And and so you got to start small, you got to start simple, but when they're preparing themselves, I always explain there's really only sort of like, three things that you need, right? The first thing that you need is you need enough runway that if you quit your job, which is what you need to do, is you need enough runway to eat and live for about 18 months, right? 12 to 18 months. And
Yeah.
so you're a wife or you got to have some money in the bank, one or the other. You kind of got to have it, because if not, you're going to be sucking money out of the business where it needs it desperately to grow. Not gonna be great, right? Second thing you need is what I call a minimum viable product, right? So if in the real estate game, it depends on which angle, if you're flipping or whatever, but you need to know that you have a source of a product to sell, whether you're approaching homeowners about wholesaling their products through their houses through them or something like that. But that's your minimum viable product. Later, that might include renovations, it might include property management, there might be a million things, but I mean, in the beginning, you need one minimum viable product, right?
Yeah.
So you got the money, the runway, you got two, you got the product, and three, the third thing that you need in order to make the jump is you need the first customer that you don't deserve, and you gotta earn, you gotta work to keep them, and you got to earn the rest of them, right? And so what I
Uh,
mean is like when you're kind of like, haven't done it before, then you don't have a track record. So regardless of what you think, somebody's taking a chance on you, and you probably don't deserve it in a way because you have no track record. You might be a
mhm.
nice person, you might be good looking, you might have an important parent, but you yourself probably don't deserve that first chance, right? Those are the three things. And if you can get those things and line them up, then you find yourself facing this wall of fear. Just take that last step and jump over the wall, because regardless of what side of the wall you're on, you're going to be scared shitless, right? And the wall will either be holding you back or pushing you forward, because once you jump onto the other side of the wall and you don't have a job and this and that, and you're living off of your savings, or your spouse is paying for your ramen noodles, that at that point, the fear and motivation will drive you forward, right? And so so that's the terms of starting. I kind of maybe rambled on a little too long, but
No, that's
yeah.
great. It's actually really poignant to real estate investment, because I'll start like with each point, the 12 to 18 months of your food fund, basically, right?
Yeah.
That that is there is a lot of rhetoric in this industry of makes seven figures in less than 6 months, and it's people in
Right.
rented suits on rented Ferraris, and you know
Yeah.
it it's a small portion of the industry, but they shout real loud, and so you have people coming in that have false expectations of what the ramp time is going to be. And don't get me
Right.
wrong, real estate has built more millionaires than any other industry in the world, right?
Right.
And more solo entrepreneurs becoming millionaires. So it does happen,
Yeah.
and it happens often, but it doesn't happen in the first 3 months, right? So
Right.
and
Yeah.
probably realistically, it's going to take you, more like 18. I
Yeah.
had a guest on recently and basically said, look, if you could stick this out for 36 months and just kind of eke by, even at the end of 36 months, you'll have a business that you can live off of, and you can scale from there, and you'll be good. But it,
Right.
it's getting up to that 12, 18, even 36 month
Yeah.
mark, that if you don't have the backup funds to deal with the drier months, there's a chance that you drop out too early, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's an important factor.
Yeah. And I've seen this funny joke going around on social media recently about the way to become super rich in real estate. Super easy. You just go to any town, any thriving town, and just drive out 30 miles from the downtown core, buy some land and wait, right? And wait
Yeah,
30 years,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Sure.
you'll be rich, right? And
Yeah.
so definitely not a get rich quick scheme, right?
No,
But if you look in most towns, I mean, the strategy actually is not that bad, right?
no,
And
it's not. It's smart.
yeah,
If you're
yeah,
18 and you've got a little extra cash, it's a hell of a good way
right.
to retire, honestly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, yeah.
if you're starting
Right.
at 50, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Um,
And
your second point of that viable product, right? There's a wholesaling or buying land wholesale and then flipping it. This is a very viable business model. It's been in place for years. People have thrived, but there is competition. And that kind of gets to the point of your third point of like that customer you don't deserve. Because what happens in this industry, and people get nervous going in, is, let's say you send out some text messages through launch control to start getting conversations going. Someone else also sent a text message to that same homeowner. And someone else is going to get into what we call a discovery call, right? They're going to get into a discovery call with that homeowner, and someone is going to have to take a chance on you, because you're probably not going to be the best call that they took. Someone else with a bit more polish and a bit more of
right.
a pitch that they can lean on is also going to call that person. So you're going to have to learn to, one of the things that we always point out, or really the big coaches always point out when they come on, is they just have to like you. Right? Like, you have to
Yeah.
be able to create empathy
Right.
and understanding.
Right.
It's it there's no pitch that you read through is going to give that. You have to listen and respond and build that rapport. It just takes practice.
Yeah. The problem is most people like they practice what I call kind of like fake rapport, right? And so and you can kind of see through it, and it's kind of like jilted or stilted conversation, and they're not really genuinely they really don't care about the customer, right? And so you know, I kind of go on ad nauseum in the book about building rapport and empathy and those kind of things. Like, to me, these are the cornerstones of being a pleasure to do business with, which is what I built my last business on. And we grew it. My partner and I grew it from $1 million in the first year to $84 million in revenue, and 15 years later when we sold it. So
Wow.
we were very good at being a pleasure to do business with, and so you need to practice, you truly do need to be a pleasure to do business with. And that means don't be a pain in the ass, right? And and so you need to learn the skills of listening and rapport building and practicing empathy and what have you, but it needs to come from a genuine place. And the more you can put yourself in the customer's shoes and stop thinking about, hey, I got to tell them about this feature and benefit or this, when they're going to get, and try to figure out where they're at in their world. Like me, obviously there's in real estate, it's going to be, are you an empty nester? Are you a family of like with 6 kids? Or, like these things are hugely dependent upon the person's desire to move out of that place and go somewhere else, right? Theoretically, they got to go somewhere. So if you're buying their place, they're moving. And so why would they want to move? And then say, okay, well, if I was a couple and they're 72 years old and the kids are gone and there's no grandkids coming or whatever, it might be a downsizing thing, or you've got to figure out like you say, you use that word avatar, like the avatar of the top 5 or 6 kind of profile customers you'd be targeting in neighborhoods. And then start to figure out, well, if I was 70 and I didn't have any grandkids, like what would I want? Right.
Yeah.
And, and then you can start packaging up your benefits to exactly how they feel and what they need versus what you think are the best things. Cause, you might think, hey, we're great because we're maybe no commission, no fee or something like that, or like for a realtor, or it's a fast sale, or you don't need to do any repairs, but I mean, it might be something completely different for that person. And
Mhm.
you want to be selling to the needs of the customer and the emotion that they're trying to get to, not what you think is your best, shiniest feature that day, right?
Yeah, I interviewed someone once for a sales job, and he gave an analogy that I love. He said, "I didn't get it good at sales until I learned to stop rolling the ball across the floor." That's what I've got,
Yeah, that's a good one.
and
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, I like that. So and yeah, we teach that a lot at with the clients at Launch Control, where I said, like, a lot of what you need is in the data that you're using. So if you know what
Right.
neighborhood they live in, you know what their age bracket is, and to some extent financial situation, you have the ability to have a pretty good insight into who you're going to end up on a phone call with, and
Right.
that gives you enough information to kind of maybe tweak the way you approach things, right? It's not
Yeah.
like there's a wildly different way that you send a text message for somebody who's has a high equity situation with their house and they're 55 or older, as somebody that is nearing pre foreclosure. But in both cases, you want to know who you're going to end up on a phone call with, because
Yeah.
if you're going to end up on a phone call with somebody, regardless of age, who's going into a pre foreclosure situation with their house, you want to be able to empathize and not point out negative things, right? You don't go, "Hey, you fell in a hole." You don't say, "Oh, I
Yeah.
heard you're going into pre foreclosure. I think I can bail you out." That's never going to work, right? But if
Right.
you know
Yeah.
what their situation is, you can find a way to be helpful, find a way to be empathetic. Same
Yeah.
thing with somebody who's older, sitting on a house that they're in no risk of losing. Why would they work with you? Why? How are you going to
Right.
connect with them? These are things
Yeah.
you want to think about going into the call, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so the one thing I just want to take off of what you're saying is you're talking about empathy is that oftentimes people they're confusing sympathy, empathy, and compassion, and they don't know which one is which and which one to practice at which
Mm,
moment in time, right? And so oftentimes people are actually practicing what I call sympathy, not empathy, right? And so sympathy is just understanding like someone's struggle, right? Like, oh, you're going into foreclosure, that must really suck, right? That's not empathy, right? That's
yeah,
sympathy. Empathy is actually taking yourself out of the home you live in, which is comfortable with the car in the driveway and groceries, and putting yourself in that person's shoes and feeling what they feel for a moment in time. Right. And
yeah,
like this guy's literally losing his house, or his kids have all moved away and he's got to downsize, or whatever whatever the reason is. Right. And then feeling that, right? And then compassion is the desire to want to change that person's state, right? So it's kind of like, and I call them the 3 pillars of caring about your customer, right? Sympathy plus empathy equals compassion, and that's when you're moving towards trying to change their situation. And so I know it gets kind of like swarmy there or whatever, but understanding it is, and these are not just words, right? They have meaning, and and you won't come across genuine unless you actually practice the right thing at the right time, right? And
yeah,
so, and a lot of, I'm always pushing, because I'm in sales, right? Is you know the it might start with a door mailer, or and then maybe a phone call, but eventually you gotta get in front of the person, right? Like, yes, there's a lot of tools. We're going to use AI and others to get you, but those are marketing, right? The selling is when you're either on the phone talking to the guy or at the front door talking to the husband or the wife. And that's the true selling part, right? Everything else is marketing. And
yeah.
again, important to know the difference between those. And yeah, so
Cool. No, I appreciate that. Those are some great insights. And I'd like to give you one more avatar, if you don't mind, before we move
sure.
on to kind of
Yeah,
discussing AI a bit. Let's jump to the other side of the industry, or not the other side of the industry, but the other side of scaling up. Right. So on the other
okay.
side of scaling up, you find people that are running often 7 or even 8 figure real estate investing businesses, and they're the two kind of core things that they're looking to do is to one, I mean, I guess three. One, make sure that there's stability, even if they're not wearing all the hats. And then the sort of sub bullet point to that is, how do I make sure I'm not wearing all the hats? And
Right.
then the third one would be, now how can I make this business bulletproof by diversifying? Because if 2008 happens, if the pandemic happens, those inflection points we talked about, is that what can I do to make sure that the walls don't come crumbling down?
Right. Okay. Okay. So, and of course, probably sell the business too, right? And
We're right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay. So the one thing is that, and again, I joke about this in the book a little bit, the $12 million problem or whatever, and I'm using it to talk about a specific kind of business that I worked in, right? A distributor, and I used to say like any idiot can build a $12 million company, and it used to be 8 million, but that was in the 80s and the 90s, and then I had to raise it for inflation. And the thing is,
Yeah.
you're never going to get past the 12 million in that kind of a business if you're I can't remember the exact words you used, but sort of like in the thick of it or whatever. If you're running
Mhm.
everything, you'll never get past that because you're trying to close a deal, on an eightplex or something, and the secretary comes and says, "Hey, Michael, can we afford the 3-ply paper, toilet paper this month for the office bathroom?" And
Yeah.
you're like, you know what, Sally, I'm almost done flipping this apartment. Just hold off on that because I think I might have a coupon for Costco, and so I'll deal with that when I'm done flipping an apartment, right? And I use that as my
Would that
sort
be a
of my
CTO, not a chief
part of
technical officer, but a chief toilet paper
toilet paper,
officer?
exactly, right. And as long as you're the chief, the CTPO, right,
Yeah.
you're not going to grow, right? And
Yeah.
in order to grow, that's where you got to kind of document everything, and you have to start building processes in the business, whether it's the wholesale process, the flipping process, the renovation process, the funding process, the collections process. And these are all very definable and highly repeatable processes that thousands and thousands of people have done and can teach you, not me, but I mean, others can teach you how to do those, each individual ones really, really well. But you have to document everything. You need standard operating procedures for your sales process so you can scale it and send more people out to the neighborhoods and out to the property manager, buy other properties or whatever. And then you need to start, in order to bulletproof the business, which you asked about, you need to build sort of redundancy in the people and the technology. It needs to be repeatable and reliable, and it'll operate the same way whether Jack or Sally's doing it, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
Um, and you at this point now, you're kind of moved up the food chain again. You're trying to get past that $12 million mark, kind of thing. You want to be making sure that you're focusing on the metrics, right? The weekly, the monthly, the quarterly, annual metrics that drive a business forward, specifically a real estate business. And there are sort of deals in the flow, deals closing, your average gross margin, your cap rates on properties that you're buying and or selling or whatever. There's again, I'm not a financial expert on real estate, but I mean, there are numerous and dozens of important metrics that you want to be focusing on at that point in the business, when you're at that stage, 7-8 figures, right? And that's what the people that are going to buy your business are going to say: show me your sales process, show me if you're so good at flipping or you're so good at wholesaling, like, show me your wholesale process. And people are going to want to see that. And
When do you recommend that people start looking for guidance and help there? Right. So, like, if you're starting up a business, a real estate investment business, you probably want a coach or a mentor that can walk you through some of the the tripping points and red
Yeah.
flags to look out for, right? And I've talked to a lot of really, really successful entrepreneurs in this business whose businesses scaled up pretty quickly, and they suddenly find themselves a little behind the eight ball in that situation of what you're talking about of, well, how do I create redundancy, and how do I incentivize my top earners to stay with the company and not bail on me, and how do I, like, all of these questions that you have to go over. um,
Yeah.
what what point do you think people need to start thinking about that to get ahead of it, so they don't get stuck with too much to
Yeah,
figure out?
so you need to, obviously you're going to want to be like seeking out coaches and mentors and people that you can network with from the get-go, right? But the thing that is, your budget might be limited in terms of how much you can spend on those, right? Some you might not be able to hire a, six-figure coach, the day you start your business, but you could join a mentorship group or something like that, and you can barter and trade things. You might be an expert at renovations and permitting, and you might know a guy who's an expert at funding and financing, right? And you can
Yeah.
you can barter for it, right? But so the coaching side of it, you want to be culling that all the time. But in terms of like bringing in the help and spending the money on the business itself, you kind of want to look at yourself and say, what do I suck at the worst, right? And so a lot of times it might be like the money or something like that. Like you're good at spending money, but you're not so good at controlling money or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And so even though you might think you've cleared 100K that year, maybe you want to spend 50 and hire a controller, and maybe they're only part-time, right? Because of the size
Yeah.
of the business, and a good one costs 150 grand. Maybe they're only in 2 days a week, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you want to immediately replace yourself in all the areas that you're not that great at. And when you truly want to be an entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs want to be the boss of everything. They don't actually want to be the chief sales guy, the chief finance officer, the chief reno officer. They would love to be the guy that's driving around and probably in a nice car or whatever, right? Driving the teams and looking at the numbers and scaling the business. And that means you need someone way better than you on top of each one of the departments that make your business run, right? And so I say, take yourself out of each job as fast as you possibly can. And, and sometimes it requires you to defer, that getting a new car or whatever. That's why I'm saying it takes 12 to 18 months, not 2 months. You might flip a bunch of houses and make a bunch of cash in the first 90 days. But if you go and spend all that on frivolous things or whatever, instead of hiring staff, there's not much longevity to it. Right. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't much like the term visionary. I think visionary gets wildly overused.
Right.
But you're right. Like, when you own a business, you start a business, you want to be able to have the big ideas, and you want someone else to execute those big ideas,
Right.
so that you can focus on growth and lifestyle and enjoying the thing that you, because you said, like, you got to get started, right? That it takes 12 to 18 months. You have to have a viable product. You have to win over your first customer, all of that. That part's, I don't care how much of an entrepreneur you are naturally, that part's scary, right?
Yeah,
And you
definitely.
took a risk, and so you deserve the reward, right? You deserve for someone else to do the hard work. You
Right.
deserve for most of the money to go to you. Like,
Absolutely.
you took that risk, and yeah, that's where, as a business owner, you want to get to that point where you are reaping the rewards of the risks that you took and the choices that you made.
Right. And the one thing that's not immediately apparent to someone that's just prior or just starting a business or whatever is the sort of concept of what I call it, kind of like the lottery ticket concept, in the sense that some people think of being an entrepreneur and making a lot of money, right? And so what they think is like, I'm going to be running this business and I'm going to be driving a Ferrari or whatever, right? But it may be a little different, right? It may be you're running the business and driving a F-150, and in the end you sell the business for 20 million and then you buy a Ferrari, right? And
Yeah.
so, because once you've owned the business, it gets you a lottery ticket where you're never going to get that working for someone else. right? And the chances of a payoff are greatly higher. You could get zero, you could go out of business, but even if you do, you can start again, right? It's only a moment in
Mhm.
time. But when you're running that business, somebody can come along and buy it for several $1,000,000 from you at sort of any point in time. Where else are you going to get a ticket to win like that other than being an entrepreneur? And
Yeah.
so, but it doesn't mean, don't confuse like sort of the daily income, dividends or pay that you take out of your company with the payoff that you're going to get later, even when you sell the company. They're
Yeah.
kind of different, right? And so, and sort of the more you reinvest in better people, better systems, processes, and growing your business today, and sort of avoid spending money, the more you're going to get later when you flip your business. And
Yeah. So when you on the topic of flipping your business, if you've got a real estate business, and let's say you've got a wholesaling side of the business that produces on average $600,000 a year in cash flow. You've also got a rental portfolio of say 50 units across the
right.
country, and you've got some notes and things like that that are also part of what you've got in terms of cash coming in. How would you go about kind of packaging that up for a complete or partial sale of the business?
Okay, so it's at that point in that size, it becomes kind of an exercise in mathematics, really. And so, and I'm not 100% certain of the exact multipliers and whatever in real estate because I kind of
Mhm.
sold a different kinds of business to speak,
Sure.
smartly about it. But I mean, a lot of businesses they pay like three. If you're below, say, $1,000,000 of free cash flow or whatever, it's going to pay a multiple of say like 2.5 to 3.5. If you're in the $1 to $5 million range of sort of profits and earnings and what have you, it might pay 5.5 to 7.5 or something like that. And above 10 million, it's like you're in the 10 to 12s in terms of the multiples and what have you, right? And each piece of that in the real estate game has fairly defined amounts that you're going to get for the business. The question is, are you going to get on the low end or the high end? And that's more about positioning the business to be sold, right? So the 600K in cash flow from the wholesale business, I'm not sure if they'll pay you a 3 times multiple for that business. If it's showing the 3-year average at 600,000, maybe they'll give you a 3 times multiple. Maybe they'll give you a 5 times multiple. I'm not 100% sure, but they'll give you some kind of a multiple for it, right? On the 50 properties, it's kind of like the cap rate and the vacancy rates and the things like that. And there's people smarter than me that would know exactly how that portfolio would price out. But
Sure.
nonetheless, now the question though is like, how do I buy this business? Is it encumbered with all sorts of problems and things like that, right? And so that's where, as we said earlier, you want everything documented. You want redundancy in the systems. You want the people in place. You're not buying me. You're buying my business, and I can step away
Mhm.
after a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever, and be gone. Right? Here's a
Yeah.
year or 2 years or 3 years of my weekly dashboard of metrics that I follow on terms of right. And also showing them that my people are good long-term people. There's a culture of accountability. There's rewards and systems in place. There's core values in place. And it's sort of positioning the business to be sold, right? And
Sure.
so, yeah. But when it comes to the price, a lot of times now it just becomes a multiple of how much, whether it's recurring revenue, repeat revenue, or static, kind of like buy hunt what you kill revenue, right? And the
Mhm.
highest multiple is paid on recurring revenue. Um, that's what companies will pay the most for. Then it becomes repeat revenue, and then it becomes kind of like you have to go find a customer, sell them something, find a new customer, sell them something. That's the least highest
Yeah.
multiple you get on the business for that kind of business. So,
Yeah. I think if you're going to buy a business, you don't want to. This isn't. And I mean, some people are like this, right? Like some people want to buy a business it's a rusted out piece of crap, so that they can
right.
fix it up and make it show ready. But there's a
Yeah.
good portion of people that want to buy a business that's turnkey and they don't have to touch it and well not
Right.
touch it, but like they can make a couple of little scale tweaks and get it to
Right.
go from whatever 10 million to 20, or from 10 to 40 or whatever, because they've got an idea in mind.
Yeah.
They don't want to go into a rusted infrastructure to get there. So
Right.
we're gonna, with that in mind, I think that there's a way to kind of combine here what you were talking about with redundancies and efficiencies, and making sure that you have a really clean, documented, sellable business, and then showing a bit of forward thinking in terms of like where the industry is headed. AI becomes a big part of that, right? If you can
Right.
show someone that you're selling a business that's already effectively leveraging AI, that's already used AI to eliminate redundancy, or eliminate overstaffing, whatever it may be, right? But it fits into that efficiency and growth sort of model. So
Right.
how do you see small businesses, or SMB size businesses leveraging AI now, and a little bit like what you see coming? I realize that's an umbrella
Yeah.
question, but I'll let you kind of
Yeah.
break it down a
So
bit.
before I will answer it, but before I do, I want to sort of share a little cheat code I learned kind of the hard way, which is that the you kind of talked about the rust bucket and then the fully operating business, right? But there's
Yeah.
like a kind of like a sweet spot that's in the middle, and it's like you don't want any rust on it or whatever, but you want to be able to show to the new owner that's going to buy your business that everything runs good. But if you buy my business and come in and you put in this, this, and this, you can get a quick win. And
Uh,
especially if it's private equity, because private equity needs to show that win early. And then they want to flip it every 3 years, 3 to 5 years, right? And so they need to scale the value of the business. So if you go out and spend all this money on AI before you sell it, then they're kind of going to be prepaying for it all and they can't get the win. So don't build all the wins and leave something for the new owner to do, right? No rust bucket,
yeah.
but not perfectly every system's been adopted and deployed, right? And AI is a perfect example of that, where maybe you're ready to spend a ton of money on something, but you know, and in real estate now, I mean, it's just you can't even keep track of all of the tools that are available, right? But I mean, obviously, everything that you write and send to a customer, you want to curate it through obviously the Chat GPT or Grok, but then you want to run it through, things like undetectable and make sure that you're writing something that's human. And because if people see the telltale AI-ness of it all, they'll just delete it without even reading it now because the people are getting savvy, right? But then, in real estate, there's, these are just ones that I've heard of and stuff, but things like Deal Machine, which looks for skip tracing and property lookup and owner outreach, all of it powered by AI, right? And,
Mhm.
and I know that you're involved with tools for contacting customers, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you need to, AI is of course perfect for that. And, the and then also you want to be deploying tools like reimagine or something like that, where you can show prospective buyers what this home's going to look like after you've taken possession of it, right? And
Mhm.
it will reimagine the home, right? We're going to take all these homes, but we're going to put a stone face on all of them, and we're going to upgrade the whole subdivision or something like that, right? And
Yeah,
and
if you don't mind, let me give
yeah,
you like a couple of examples and tell me what AI tools you would use in these given
sure,
circumstances, because there's a lot that you could potentially do, right? So
yeah,
for people that are using launch control, a big headache is getting the messaging to, because that you have to have a certain variety of messages going out. So having basically getting the messages in place, but also kind of what I alluded to before of speaking to your customer profiles. Like, what message
okay,
should I be sending to somebody that is going into foreclosure? What message would I send to somebody that's an out of state uh, landlord and probably owns a couple of properties? What would I say to somebody who owns their house free and clear, but maybe it's in a bit of a state of distress? Different recipient profiles. What tool would you use to create good, solid, response driven messaging?
so there may be a specifically tailored agent that's now been curated within, but for me, I would actually go to ChatGPT for something like that, because
Okay.
it's going to give you it's going to give you a litany of choices for each one of those, and you can then pick from it, right? And but I'm quite sure, I haven't looked through the list of all of the GPTs that you can pick from, but there's probably numerous ones just within the standard premium plan that I
Yeah.
would start with, right? And the whole thing would be about building a proper prompt to pull that kind of information out of the tool, right? It's as much
Yeah.
about the prompt as it is about the tool, right? And so, kind of a go-to answer saying ChatGPT, but I mean, for that particular one,
Well,
that's
what
what I would
about
use.
it's probably your answer for this will probably be YouTube, and that's fair. But in terms of you know, getting educated about prompts, right? Because we help people with prompts. We give them examples, things like that. But you're right. Ultimately, it's about uh, what you put into the prompt is going to define what you get out, and how usable that is at scale. So how if somebody just wants to do a deep dive today and really get educated about prompts, where would you send them?
So yeah, the obviously you gave the answer of YouTube is a great source, but also I would actually probably use ChatGPT to give me the prompts that I need. It was
Really?
like,
Okay.
I want to write a prompt, for you to help me to define these three types of avatars for my customer and whatever. How would I structure the prompt so that I would get the best answer out of you? And I mean, it will actually write it for you, right? And
Yeah.
so there's yeah, I mean, the tools now are just so incredible, and
Yeah.
and even inside of depending upon the kind of CRM tools that you're using and stuff like that, a lot of now they're just spending obviously tons of money in Salesforce and HubSpot and Zoho and companies like that to drive these AI automations and things and helpers inside their tool to keep you from leaving. Because the problem is that, if you leave Salesforce or one of these companies CRMs where you're doing your day-to-day work to go to AI somewhere else, you might realize, hey, I don't need such an expensive Salesforce. I can just use some free CRM, and I'll go to this AI tool to get the heavy lifting, which is what I really need, right? So inside of those tools, there's probably a lot, and Adobe is Adobe AI also is a plugin that you can use with for sales and marketing, which is also really good. So,
I
but
I love that advice about asking it to write the prompt for you, because what I've learned using these tools is that you really need to think about it as a as an employee at your company, right? So if
right,
I hired someone to write messages for me to use within launch control, it would be unfair of me if they sat down day one to just say, write me 100 text messages that I can use to send in launch control, and write them for these different types of people. They
right.
don't know my business. They've never seen anything about like what a sales conversation looks like. They don't know anything about the reasons why people sell in any given situation. They don't know any of that. But if you back it all the way out and you go, okay, you're going to help me with several tasks for my company. First thing I need you to do is get familiar with my company. Here's my website. Here's what we do. Ask me any clarifying questions you want, right? You
Yeah,
educate it about your company, and then you go, okay, I need you to understand who my clients are, like if especially if you have like some call recordings that you can upload or something where it can look at the transcripts and
right.
see, and you feed it the sort of training that you would give to a new employee, except for it absorbs it in seconds, not
And
weeks or months.
permanent, and it's
Yeah,
permanent, right?
and it's
Like,
permanent.
because people don't realize that, right? Like when they're new
Yeah,
to it, that you only have to tell it once, and then it'll remember all that stuff, and you could just keep on giving it new information, right? And
exactly. And so yeah, if you
yeah,
think about that, think about that way, you train it like a new employee and then you give it the task, the outcome will be much better than if you just go, hey,
right.
give me 10 text messages. right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And again, yeah, there's all sorts of like for you can, just using Google or using just any search engine now, to find for customer profiling and dissecting and whatever. There's the tools are coming out. There's so much competition. I don't even know how they're all going to flush out. I don't know if they'll all buy each other and there'll be 3 tools in a year from now or whatever, but there's just a litany of them available. And
Yeah.
and they're all 10, $20 a month. And so you got to find the right tools, what you really need, and in order to get the job done. But once you've put them together, it's incredible how much automation you can build into it, right?
And it's worth experimenting because I have like a couple of
Yeah.
different platforms that I use for different things. And ChatGPT, I gave it an assignment to do something that was graphic. I want you to design like basically like a landing page or something, right? And it included a logo. And
Yeah.
what I got out of that platform was actually pretty good. I ended up using it on or parts of it on a project that I was working on. I gave the exact same prompt and assignment to one of the other platforms, and it was just laughably bad. Not even
Yeah.
remotely close. Looked
Right.
like something that I could have done back when I was like playing Oregon Trail as a kid, you know? And
Yeah.
it's like
I've seen
this
that
is
too.
not what I was looking
Yeah.
for. And I get like a
Yeah.
really like, you're absolutely right. I missed the
Yeah.
mark kind of response,
Yeah.
but it didn't have the capabilities to do it. So
Yeah.
until, like you said, until we get like 3 of these things that can do everything, you do have to kind of play around a little bit.
You mix and match. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. On the graphic side, Mid Journey, of course, is amazing and very, very powerful.
yeah,
And I got, I saw an advertisement on social media for one of these kind of ones for if you needed a bunch of headshots or whatever, right? And I have some headshots and stuff for media and stuff, but it said like, give us your headshots and then we'll give you more, right? And so I uploaded my best headshots to it and I paid the $25 or whatever it was, and I got the 20 headshots that it promised me. But I showed it to people that know me, and they're like, "That's not you." Like, yeah, it
yeah,
looks like you, but it's not you, right? And so whatever. It was a couple of bucks I spent, but I mean, I couldn't use them. And I mean, they looked good, right? In a lot of cases, I looked better, but I mean, it wasn't like taking my head and putting me on 3 different suits and 3 different casual outfits, and
yeah.
in a bunch of different scenarios. It was like it literally made a new me, and so you gotta
Oh,
you
I
gotta
see what you mean. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah,
too
it
bad this
wasn't my
stuff's not
face.
working.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's too bad that's not working yet because all of my headshots are pictures my mom took like 7 years ago. So
yeah, right. Yeah,
I was like, oh, that'll be a quick fix. All right, so Glenn, we're going to give in the episode description, we're going to give people however many ways you want to give them to get in touch with you. We'll make sure that
sure.
everything's in the episode description below. We'll of course link to any of your social media accounts. People can get in touch with you there. So how should people get in touch with you?
Yeah.
What's the next steps for listeners?
Most people want to talk to me, so the best way would be just connect with me on LinkedIn and then send me a message. And I mean, it's just Glenn Poulos on LinkedIn, and you'll see that I'm pretty active there. Um, and also you can connect to me on my website, but it'll send me a message. But I mean, I'm probably just going to tell you to connect with me on LinkedIn because I mean it's a messaging platform. And yeah, and I mean, if they want to buy the book, there's no pressure. But if they want to buy the book, it's on Amazon or anywhere else. And happy for someone to read the book. And yeah, and that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. I think we definitely got some good actionable advice for people at various different stages of the real estate investment businesses. So yeah, definitely appreciate you taking the time and
Yeah.
being on the show today.
Well, thanks, Michael. Great being here.